pediatrics and obesity. And then as my career went on and there was very few people, very little access to obesity medicine doctors, I started treating adults as well. And I think what Oren and I have in common is that a lot of players in this industry take shortcuts, they don't follow the evidence, and I think we have a lot of pressure on our backs to do something quickly and get quick results, and we're up against a lot of misinformation from social media, Google searches, and I think we're going to try to break it down for you today. And it's nice to be on a panel where you know that you're going to agree with everything somebody else says, or I think we are a good, we complement each other.
All right, so I'm going to kick this off. We're talking about population health, preventive medicine, and I'll start with the softball, but don't worry, I'll get challenging as time goes on. So first, you know, with obesity and your background in obesity medicine, and you know, we hear a lot about GLP-1s. I'd love to know how you see GLP-1s and clinical outcomes in population health, and how does that matter? And I ask this because GLP-1s, we think about it for weight loss, but what does that actually mean for our healthcare system and population as a whole?
Well, I can tell you what I saw in private practice and what I know is going on and where I think it should go. So GLP-1s for a long time have been the Wild West of obesity medicine. Most people don't know that GLP-1s were actually invented, or like they first were made in 2005. So most people think that GLP-1s are new drugs, and they're not new drugs. So we had a lot of experience with GLP-1s, using them with type 2 diabetics, and then we saw the nice benefit of the weight loss, and then we started studying them as weight loss drugs. So my biggest problem as a physician and working at EMED is that most people see these as vanity drugs. So they see them as, I have a wedding to go to, I need to fit into a tuxedo, I need to wear a prom dress, and it's something very short term. And actually, I was on a panel last week, and my friend Dr. Agati from UVA was telling me about his research. He's an exercise physiologist, and that every time you lose weight on a GLP-1 and go off and go back on and go off and go back on, when you gain that weight back, 90% of it is fat mass. So you're even gaining more weight back than you probably would have, and it's much harder to lose fat, we know that. So I think, I mean, I'm aging myself out, but when I started working in population health at Johns Hopkins when I was an undergraduate, I mean, we had to call people on the phone to get information. We had to send letters out. I mean, we were reaching out to men in jails. I was studying HIV. It was very hard to do population health. Population health now with telehealth, where Oren comes in, with the advent of, you know, the internet, smartphones, AI, we can get such granular data on such a large scale to really move the needle in people's health.
Great. Totally agree with a lot of that. Let's dig in a little deeper. Okay, so we have obesity and the reduction of obesity with GLP-1s. What are you seeing with other health outcomes? I know that I've seen a lot about, you know, cancer, and I've seen a lot about heart disease. What do we know about that space, and what does that mean for our healthcare system? I also see a high cost associated with GLP-1s.
Sure. So the problem is that GLP-1s are not accessible to everyone. And we know that people turn to compounds and different products on the market that we really can't study. So anybody who tells you, oh, I got a compound, but they've been studied, well, they haven't. They've been made, but they have not been clinically tried in any rigorous clinical trial. So I can only tell you what I've read and what my experience has been as a clinician and at EMED. So anybody who starts a GLP-1 without having biomarkers tested, you don't know what your baseline is. You know, you might know your weight, and that's about it. So you really need to have blood tests done, whether you're doing it through the EMED program or through your physician. You need to know where you're starting. Are you pre-diabetic? Do you have a poor lipid profile? Do you have familial hypercholesterolemia? There's so many questions. Do you have inflammation? I mean, we know now. You know, we used to have a slide when I started GLP-1s of like what it could treat, and now the slide just goes on and on and on and on. So we know it reduces metastases in some cancers. We know that it decreases inflammation. So not just losing weight and improving your knee because you're bearing less weight on your knee. We have studies that are going to come out now that are going to show that the GLP-1s have anti-inflammatory properties that actually decrease the inflammation in your body, and you're probably going to be less likely to get a knee replacement for those two reasons, not just the weight loss. So there's so many things, and I think that what I see is people coming onto eMed who are very used to getting a prescription for 12 months. You know, the doctor doesn't want to deal with the insurance companies. They don't want to have to get the prior authorization every month. And really, your dose should be titrated every month to every 3 or 4 months at least. And they need to hire extra staff, like a physician at a hospital or a private practice doctor needs somebody, if they take insurance, to be on the phone all day to get prior authorization for maybe 3 prescriptions. So you need a whole salary for another person to get the prior authorizations for these drugs. There are so many roadblocks. And I think it's going to change. I think as the insurance companies realize that the cost of these drugs are coming down, but the cost of the other drugs and the other admissions, you know, GLP-1s reduce MACE, major adverse cardiovascular events, which you know, by 20 to 30% in some studies. So that's a huge savings to an insurance company, to an employer who's paying for insurance. So I just think that we have to do these rigorous trials because we need to convince people that they're just not a vanity drug.
So to summarize all that, it sounds like, and I totally agree, but the cost of the drugs have come down. There are prior authorizations, which is when the physician, and I do this a ton, and I'm sure you have, asks for permission from the insurance company to actually prescribe something and get clearance for it. And the benefit of spending that extra few dollars a month on the GLP-1s, to us, what I actually have to document, the benefit is so great because you can reduce other health or outcomes, what we said MACE. So heart disease goes down, right? Some cancers, it sounds like we may be slowing the progression of it. And so that's the benefit that I see also from my lens as a doc, that now we can prescribe something that has all these other secondary benefits. So that's a great example of population health intervention where a drug can actually help reduce other health outcomes, potentially hospitalizations, etc. Everything has a risk benefits. There are risks to every drug. Whenever there's a benefit, whether it's talking about a medication that's FDA approved or a supplement, there are going to be adverse events, right? And so it's all a risk-benefit calculation, and that's something that you have to take into account when thinking about population health, right? We could talk about, you know, mammograms and how effective they are, but do we potentially overdiagnose something and therefore you have bad outcomes, right? So that is what population health is all about, and public health is as well.
And I think now with telehealth programs, we can reach people who never had access. You know, there's no democracy in healthcare in this country, right? Healthcare is not a right in the United States; it's a privilege. And there are many people who have been disenfranchised and couldn't get the care that they needed. And with telehealth programs and apps, people can stay at home and see a cardiologist. People can stay at home and speak with an obesity medicine specialist. They can do a blood test at home from the Tasso device, and they can see if they're pre-diabetic or if they're already diabetic. Things that they never would have known, because, you know, many people in America, if they don't go to work, they don't get paid for that work. You know, they can't afford to take a day off. They can't afford the babysitter to stay home with the kids. So population health, with the advance of technology, is really going to change the face of giving access to people who never had access to a drug. But with that, like you said, you need to have supervision and oversight.
So I'll move away a little bit from a GLP-1 because this topic is the future of population health and preventive care, and it's not all just one magic bullet. You know, I think that in our society, we're thinking a lot about health in other ways as well. I'll start with, you know, we're talking about diet, we're talking about exercise a lot more. You see this all over social media. I do think that there's a lot of noise. What are some of the misconceptions you see about all of these lifestyle changes that are recommended as well?
Oh, you know, paleo, every diet somebody has told me about, somebody sent me an email about it or a text. And personally, I believe in the Mediterranean diet, which I think is really about balance, right? I tell my patients, you can eat well 85% of the time, 90% of the time, and then 10% of the time you can indulge a little bit, because I think that anything that's too strict is not sustainable. That's my personal opinion. Secondly, we were sent a sweatshirt to my company that said protein, protein, protein. And if I hear the word protein, sometimes I cringe because because it's so much hype about the protein and how much protein do you need, and the truth is when you lose weight, you lose muscle mass in proportion to the weight that you are losing. And now with GLP-1s, I know you don't want to talk only about GLP-1s, but you're losing weight much faster, right? So we need resistance training. We need to do cardiovascular training. Life doesn't happen in a bubble. You have to carve out time for it. And there's no quick fix. If you do not exercise, your cardiovascular health is not going to be good. Power walking might not move the needle on the scale for you, but it's going to improve your cardiovascular health. It's going to reduce your risks of cancers. So I think that there's just so much misinformation out there that you have to think about a goal that you can achieve. Sometimes it's just stopping soda, like soda pop. If you stop drinking sodas, and we know a lot of people who drink soda every day, you're going to lose 1 pound a week just by cutting the soda out of your diet. There's about 12 teaspoons of sugar in one, soda that you drink, sweet drink. So it's just about small changes. I once heard a trainer tell a child, he said, "Oh, you know what, coach, I only did 2 push-ups today. Yesterday I only did 1. And he said, "Well, you doubled what you did." And you have to look at it that way, with that positive outlook. Small changes.
Awesome. Great. I will stop right there if that's okay, unless you have more, because I love the opportunity. I saw 2 hands go up in the back, but if there are any questions so far, I'd love to pause and give you all time to ask that. What's top of mind for you?
You're talking about the GLP-1. The GLP-1 is always looking for more and more what it can be. But I understand that there is a lot of people that are becoming allergic to it or having a side effect of it, and it's not so.
So I can answer that. There's not many allergies. There are about 20% of the population just doesn't lose weight on GLP-1s, and that's their genetics. So about 1 in 5 is not going to even respond. We see a lot of the side effects. Most of the side effects are gastrointestinal, like vomiting or nausea, bloating, gas.